Emotional meeting at the White House. After listening to survivors of school shootings, President Trump says he wants to see action. Common ground. Conservative politicians from around the country are here in Washington debating gun control and other topics. We have a report from CPAC. Message for youth. Pope Francis challenges young people to get off their phones. Plus, it's a kicker. A group of priests and seminarians begin a friendly competition in Rome. On EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, February 22nd, 2018. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. President Trump wants to arm teachers with guns. The National Rifle Association applauds that plan, but not the president's idea to raise the age limit for some gun buyers. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. The president seems confident the NRA will support his idea to raise the age requirement to purchase rifles like the one used in the Parkland shooting. Students hurting from that tragedy spoke to the president. He listened, and today he's sharing his plans to make schools safe.
We have to harden our schools, not soften them up.
Day 2 of discussions at the White House focused on securing schools. President Trump says giving educators guns should be considered, in addition to other reforms.
We're going to do strong background checks. We're going to work on getting the age up to 21 instead of 18. We're getting rid of the bump stocks, and we're going to be focusing very strongly on mental health, because here's a case of mental health.
The president hearing from state officials today, last night, from those who experienced suffering firsthand, including student survivors of the Parkland, Florida school shooting.
There needs to be a significant change in this country.
Samuel Zeif, a grieving 18-year-old, spoke directly to the president.
I lost a best friend who's practically a brother.
Zeif is concerned that teens can purchase guns like the AR-15 used in the shooting.
And I don't understand why I could still go in a store and buy a weapon of war.
My daughter has no voice. She was murdered last week.
Andrew Pollock also spoke. His daughter, Meadow, died after she was shot 9 times. He's demanding greater school security.
Should have been one school shooting, and we should have fixed it.
The president's idea to arm school staff first came up here.
This would only be obviously for people that are very adept at handling a gun.
A mother whose child was killed in the Sandy Hook massacre believes there's a better solution.
I would rather arm them with the knowledge of how to prevent these acts from happening in the first place. How do you identify the kids in your class that are most at risk?
A room filled with people pleading for changes to end the gun violence.
And Mr. President, we're going to fix it.
At today's press briefing, the White House said the proposal to arm some teachers and school staff still needs to be worked out. For instance, they don't have details on how much it would cost, but a spokesman says school safety is worth it. Any legislation would need to come from Congress because they say President Trump is not planning any executive actions. Lauren?
White House correspondent Mark Irons, thank you. The funerals continue for the 17 victims of that Florida school shooting. 49-year-old Chris Hickson, Douglas High's athletic director, was laid to rest today with full military honors. He had served in Operation Desert Storm. The service took place at Nativity Catholic Church. Vice President Mike Pence rallies the Conservative Political Action Conference, or CPAC. He highlighted the Trump administration's commitment to life, among many other issues. Correspondent Jason Calvi is at CPAC. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Lauren. The vice president says 2017 was the most consequential year in the history of the conservative movement. Now, this is the largest conservative gathering of the year. They come here from around the country and gave a warm welcome to the vice president.
Vice President Mike Pence says school safety is the administration's top national priority.
We'll pray for God's wisdom, that all of us in positions of authority might find a way to come together with American solutions to confront and end this evil in our time.
At last night's CNN town hall, one parent pressed Senator Marco Rubio to ban the AR-15, the assault rifle used in the Florida shooting.
Senator Rubio, my daughter, running down the hallway at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, was shot in the back with an assault weapon, the weapon of choice.
Yes, sir.
Okay? It is too easy to get. It is a weapon of war.
But here at CPAC, the head of the NRA defends the right to bear arms.
To stop a bad guy with a gun, it takes a good guy with a gun.
We took an informal poll of the crowd, which includes British politician Nigel Farage.
I mean, if you closed every gun shop down in America tomorrow, that isn't going to solve the problem, isn't it? Because there are so many guns already in circulation. I think the argument for background checks is logical, common sense.
Also in attendance here, college conservatives adding their voice to the debate.
Being a person of faith, I see a lot of the heartache that's been going on, especially relating to school shooting. But I think that right now we need to take care of our most sick, and a lot of those sick people are mentally sick people. We need to make sure that firearms don't get into their hands.
But some conservatives are open to stricter rules.
I don't have a problem with thorough background checks.
The vice president also reflected on the faith and legacy of Billy Graham, who died yesterday. Pence recalled Graham's words after 9/11. The spirit of this nation will not be defeated. Tomorrow, the president speaks right behind me on the CPAC stage. Lauren?
Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi. Thank you, Jason. For the second year in a row, the president and vice president are headline speakers at CPAC. President Trump is scheduled to speak tomorrow morning. The conference's first panel was on one of his favorite topics, the media and fake news. Others include Trump-onomics versus Obama-nomics. Another calls the president the new sheriff in town. And joining us now is the top sheriff at CPAC, Matt Schlapp, chairman of the American Conservative Union. Welcome back to the program, Matt.
Great to be with you, Lauren.
The vice president and president are showing you a lot of love. He tweeted, Matt Schlapp and CPAC are getting ready for another exciting event. Big difference from those days when President Obama held the White House. You've come a long way, Matt. Do you think that this administration, in particular President Trump, is the closest ally the conservative movement has seen?
I don't know how to rank him, Lauren. All I can tell you is that he has been listening to conservatives at CPAC since 2011. He's the rare politician that actually listens more than he talks, and he knows what we care about. And I think he's come to agree with us on so many of our solutions. And his agenda for the first year in his presidency has really been spectacular for conservatives. So I have to say, it's something of a love fest here at CPAC.
I bet. Earlier today, however, Wayne LaPierre, the National Rifle Association's EVP and CEO, told the crowd that opponents of gun rights want to, quote, sweep under the carpet the failure of school safety. In the wake of the Florida shootings, critics are lambasting the NRA, saying it shouldn't be buying politicians. What is your response?
Yeah, you know, Lauren, you know my family, and I drop off 4 of my girls at St. Mary's Catholic School in Alexandria, Virginia, a couple times a week. And I find it ironic that there's an armed off-duty policeman that brings all the cars in and helps us drop off our kids. But when the bells ring and school starts, that police officer goes away. And I like the idea that there would be armed professionals at schools that might be victimized by this type of violence. I would feel better if there were professionals in that school making sure that a bad person, an evil person that would want to do my children harm would be stopped. And I think we have to be smarter about security. You know this, every building in Washington, D.C., you can't get in it. Sometimes you have to go through a magnetometer, they check your ID. There are certain steps we just need to take as a country. I think it's unfortunate, but that's right, totally right.
Promises made, promises kept. That's the message that Vice President Pence delivered to the crowd today. And he says that a wall will be built. Is that non-negotiable for conservatives?
Yeah, I mean, it really was the crowd became uncorked when he brought up the wall, because it's a symbolic important step for the country to actually change our immigration policy. If you can't secure the southern border, and if we don't allow the people who are waiting in line to become Americans to come in before people who come in illegally, we're going to have a lot of problems as a country. And it's the wrong first lesson for a brand new American that it's okay to cut in line. It's the wrong lesson. We have a process. We need to follow the process. And the wall is part of making sure we have an orderly process.
All right, Matt Schlapp, best of luck to you with the rest of the conference, chairman of the American Conservative Union. The body of Reverend Billy Graham will lie in honor in the U.S. Capitol Rotunda next week. It's the first time a private citizen has been accorded such recognition since civil rights hero Rosa Parks in 2005. Graham died yesterday at the age of 99. World leaders at the United Nations are trying to end the carnage in Syria. Yet another new wave of airstrikes in the suburbs of Damascus have left more than a dozen people dead. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsby is here. He has the latest details. Good evening, Wyatt.
Good evening, Lauren. The death toll is now above 400. This is within the last 5 days. The United Nations Security Council is considering a vote for a ceasefire that would allow humanitarian organizations to help the victims.
The relentless shelling is forcing innocent Syrians underground. Food is scarce, medicine in short supply. But these children are singing to keep their spirits up. Above them, bombs fall in Ghouta, and about 100 lives have been lost per day.
There has just been a monstrous disregard for civilian life and infrastructure. Medical facilities have been annihilated, basically. And the situation is going from bad to worse.
The UN Secretary General wants to send in aid, noting the dozens of men, women, and children still trapped under rubble.
The unity the Security Council has shown in relation to North Korea is the kind of unity that we need in Syria to put an end to the Syrian quagmire.
Guterres says solving the conflict will require cooperation with Russia, the biggest backer of Syrian President Bashar Assad, the man responsible for the airstrikes. Top Russian officials claim a small group of Islamic terrorists are still held up in Ghouta. That's not a good enough reason, according to these demonstrators outside the Russian consulate today in Istanbul, Turkey. They say the military campaign has targeted civilians.
We've also learned that President Bashar Assad met today with a special Russian envoy who is representing Vladimir Putin. The two discussed coordinating between Damascus and Moscow in fighting insurgent groups in Syria. Russia has been supplying direct military help to Syria for the last 3 years.
This civil war has been raging for, 7 years? Pope Francis has said he is praying for this. Has the Vatican done anything other than praying?
They've offered a lot of different things, Lauren, and obviously a lot of suggestions to regional leaders and things like that. They haven't made a statement about this particular situation this week. However, the bishops of England and Wales have called this a slaughter of civilians, including children, an offense to our common humanity. They did stop there today, though. The bishops also say the international community has failed to protect the innocent, so quite a challenge for the bishops of England and Wales.
Thank you so much, Wyatt Goolsby. I'm glad you are following this story.
Thanks, Lauren.
More than 100 girls are still missing in Nigeria after suspected Boko Haram terrorists attacked their school. The kidnapping comes after the militant group kidnapped more than 270 girls from another school 4 years ago. An ex-Serbian soldier throws a bomb into the U.S. Embassy compound in Montenegro. Police say the suspect threw a grenade, then took his own life. No one was hurt in the attack, but it left a giant crater in the embassy yard. The strike is not believed to be terror-related. At least 25 are injured after an explosion on a ferry unloading passengers in the Caribbean beach city of Playa del Carmen.
Loud explosion, confusion, chaos. People, I think, reacted as well as they could.
Officials say none of the injuries is life-threatening. The U.S. Embassy says 7 Americans are among the injured. The cause of the explosion is not yet known. More than 40 people are dead and more than 24 injured after a bus drives off a cliff in southern Peru. Some of the hurt were taken to the hospital by military helicopter. The bus fell nearly 700 feet. 3 policemen in Egypt are being hailed as heroes after their quick thinking saves a child's life. The men were guarding a bank when they noticed a 5-year-old dangling from a 3rd-story apartment balcony. They rushed to catch him as he fell. Look at that. Unbelievable. The child was unharmed. One officer was taken to the hospital for treatment. Coming up, pro-life loss. A court in Kansas sides with Planned Parenthood. And World Youth Day. What the Pope wants young people to do with their electronics. A federal court says Kansas cannot cut funds to a Planned Parenthood affiliate. The state had ended its contract with the abortion provider after undercover videos were released showing executives talking about the sale of baby body parts. Planned Parenthood calls the ruling, quote, a huge win. As the church prepares for World Youth Day in Panama next year, bishops on the local level are set to celebrate this year's event next month. The Holy Father's message for the celebration, which will take place on Palm Sunday, is do not be afraid. Edward Penton, Rome correspondent for EWTN's National Catholic Register, joins us. Ed, the Holy Father gives some helpful guidance for young people in his message. What are his main points?
Well, he spoke, Lauren, primarily about the fears that young people have, the fears and insecurities. And he says, repeating what John Paul II used to say, which is do not be afraid. He says that ways to do that is to name the fears, to put one's trust in Christ, and to really to draw on God's grace and to find courage through God's grace. He talks also about moving away from dark rooms filled with computers and smartphones and opening the door to life. And he talked about building authentic relationships with other people.
I think that is just so important, especially an important message for our teens to hear is open that door to life, get off of your device. Despite a large age gap, Pope John Paul II had a great rapport with young people. I grew up with him and always watched him. Tell us how it compares to Pope Francis.
Well, Pope Francis is similar in a way. Young people, I think, generally like his warmth, his personal touch, his very human nature, and they can identify with that. So that's something that he's certainly tapped into and won a lot of popularity from young people because of that. Of course, some young people would prefer more sort of orthodoxy and more focus on tradition. But most people, I think most young people like this sort of warm touch that he gives them.
Let's switch gears. The Pope is on retreat this week. And what is the focus of his prayer? Doesn't he usually have a focus?
Yes, the theme this year is in praise of thirst, and it's really about reaching out to the peripheries and reflecting Jesus' words, I thirst, and it was really, I thirst for souls. And it was actually a favorite motto of St. Teresa of Calcutta, was just really meant to sort of get people to think of how much God really thirsts for souls, whether they're close to you or on the peripheries.
Thank you so much for giving us the 411 on the Vatican. Edward Penton, Rome correspondent for EWTN's National Catholic Register.
Thank you, Lauren.
Up next, when Harry became Sally, we discuss the transgender movement with the author of a new book. And getting the ball rolling, we'll preview a friendly game in Rome. Our next guest is the author of a new book challenging new gender ideologies being promoted across America. When Harry Became Sally, Responding to the Transgender Moment, is being released next week. In it, Ryan Anderson argues sex is neither fluid nor subjective, and that fact is supported by the best biology, psychology, and philosophy. Ryan joins us now in studio. He's a senior research fellow at the Heritage Foundation. Welcome to the
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Your research has been cited by 2 Supreme Court justices in 2 Supreme Court cases. This book is a thorough and I think thoughtful analysis of what you call the transgender moment. I think in 2015, Bruce Jenner, the explosion of this moment happened, and it sparked this national debate on transgender issues. Why are you calling this a moment and not a movement?
Sure. I mean, so it ends up being both. But what I want to highlight here is that it will be a moment that will pass if we do our work in pushing back and in telling the truth. Because the transgender moment gets human nature wrong. A decade ago, when Harry met Sally, so that's 30 years ago now, it was all about whether or not men and women could just be friends. Now we're debating whether or not men can become women, whether women can become men. This gets human nature wrong, and it won't be the wave of the future.
You've talked to many people who have done this, and I'd like to know what you've learned from them. There's a big statistic, 41% of transgender people attempt suicide. Is that what you found in talking to them?
Well, I mean, what's really sad here is that the statistics on suicide come from large samples of people who identify as transgender, and they're heartbreaking because they're remarkably high. The chapter of the book that was hardest to research was the chapter on people who transitioned and then detransitioned. And several of them have told their stories on YouTube and on blogs. And watching those videos, reading through their writings, that's heartbreaking because you see how much they have suffered and how they thought transitioning would bring them wholeness and happiness, but it didn't. And then they found that by detransitioning, they actually could re-identify with their body, and that could bring some of the healing, some of the wholeness they were seeking.
There are a lot of parents I know who are dealing with gender dysphoria and this sort of dysfunctionality that these transgender kids feel, not living in the body, not feeling like they are part of the body that they were born into. What message do you have for parents who are dealing with these issues on a day-to-day basis? You want to love your children, right?
Of course, and so that's the starting point. You have to start with a perspective of love and compassion. You should also know, as I point out in the book, the best science on this shows that 80 to 95% of children with gender dysphoria will naturally grow out of it if they're simply given the time and the space to do so. They'll naturally come to re-identify with their body if they're allowed to continue developing. And the best therapies for this don't try to transform the body to reshape the body in according to thoughts and feelings. It tries to help people align their thoughts and their feelings with bodily reality.
You say that you provide a balanced approach to public policy issues involving transgender identity. What is your advice to policymakers?
Right. So, I mean, what the law should say here is that the law shouldn't be buying into new ideologies that the word sex means gender identity. You hear activists saying that sex is merely assigned at birth, but that gender identity is what should be controlling for the law. So a boy who identifies as a girl should be allowed into the girls' bathroom and locker room, showers, sports teams. That's what the prior presidential administration did. What we should do is say, we're not going to force that student into a bathroom where he feels uncomfortable, but we can't allow him into a bathroom where everyone else feels uncomfortable. We can accommodate him with a single occupancy facility, with access to a staff lounge, a teacher's lounge, something like that. But we have to protect both sides.
Thank you so much, Ryan Anderson, Senior Research Fellow at the Heritage Foundation and author of the book, When Harry Became Sally. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ivanka Trump is headed to South Korea to attend the Winter Olympics closing ceremony. The first daughter is expected to meet with South Korean President Moon Jae-in while in Seoul. North Korea is also sending a high-level delegation. There are no public plans for the U.S. and North Korea to meet. The closing ceremony is Sunday. In the medal count, Norway, 35 medals. Germany, 25. Canada, 24. The United States moves up to fourth with 21. Our latest wins last night were fabulous. Women's hockey, skiing, snowboarding. Netherlands is in the fifth place with 17 medals. Finally, tonight, a group of seminarians and priests in Rome are becoming a little more goal-oriented. Haha, that was Christian, our writer's pun. They are taking part in the Vatican's 12th annual Clericus Cup. The soccer tournament starts this weekend. Last year, nearly 400 priests and seminarians from more than 60 countries took part. The Cameroon Urban Lions won last year. They defeated the Pontifical Gregorian University 2-0. What a kick, huh? No? Okay. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Let's keep in touch online. Follow me at Lauren Ashburn on Twitter and at Lauren Ashburn EWTN on Facebook. We'll leave you with images from inside St. Peter's Basilica on this feast of the chair of St. Peter the Apostle. Good night, and God bless you.